Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you tonight to our lecture on our continuing art presentations in conjunction with the gallery. I am Beate Böhrmann-N, the chairman of the art department, and I would like to introduce you to Jody Zellen. Jody Zellen has been an artist for some time in the photography medium. She got her MFA from the California Institute of the Arts in Valencia, and has been exhibiting worldwide, because you had one exhibit in Melbourne in Australia. Jody is going to talk to us about her work, and I hope about your production methods as well. The show has been curated by Barbara Sexton, our interim gallery curator, and I would very much like to thank Pat Vine for all the work she's doing for our receptions and for the installations. This particular show was installed by Jody herself and by, well, I forgot his name. By Brian, okay. So this is not our usual installation that is handled by the museum gallery students, but this one is an installation by the artist and by Brian. Thank you very much, and here's Jody.
Okay, can you hear me? Is that going to work? I think we have to turn the projector on. Yeah. There we go. Okay. I would like to begin this talk with a quote from a passage of a book of fiction by Douglas Cooper called Amnesia. Although this book is not about issues of urbanity, there are selected passages which reference architecture, literature, history, myth, as the reader is drawn into the main character's frighteningly dislocated world where the only response to suffering and guilt is amnesia. The quote begins, "A moment of recognition. A man stares at a map of the city, his city, but for the longest time he cannot orient himself to the lines on the page. Where do these crossed lines lie in real space? Is this color significant? And the most important question, where is he in this picture? The map suddenly says something. The lines go here. They do not simply refer, they speak. You have found your place. The map reaches out to the city around you, and there is a moment of clarity, correspondence, reciprocity. The world pictures itself. The map becomes a mirror. Your face, reflected in the mirror, finds its ground in the cradling city." How does one make sense of the urban metropolis? My work for the last 10 years or so has dealt with the theme of the city. I'm going to show you slides from an installation beginning with a show entitled Metropolis Captured from 1989. Metropolis Captured was an installation at the lab in San Francisco in 1989 that repeated my CalArts thesis show. The show was concerned primarily with language, image, and architecture. In this installation, I employed photographic materials in a sculptural way, constructing long lines of images and text that could be read as banners, barriers, and abstract landscapes that formed a grid across the space of the gallery. I use photograph here as an architectural device to confront the viewer with a dramatically altered space. In this show, all the walls and the floor were painted black and then rubbed with chalk in a random fashion. The chalk was then erased, giving a murky feeling to the walls, in addition to making reference to a classroom and erased knowledge. In the installation, 4 rows of photomural collages were hung at different heights across the room. Each photo panel was a 40-inch square black and white photograph. The images facing out, the front view of the installation, were Xeroxes from current newspaper representing different aspects of city and urban life. The images on the back side, facing the far wall of the installation, were all collages of appropriated images combined with layers of text. The images were Xerox croppings of found photographs that documented either construction, destruction, architectural models, or historical sites. In addition to pictures of buildings, I also used photographs of shadows and anonymous figures, as well as images of war. The textual element of the work was a computer collage of phrases and sentences that were pulled from contemporary criticism, postmodern theory, architectural theory, as well as poetic fragments that I wrote. These words were typed into the computer and layered on top of each other. Then specific phrases and words were enlarged and put into different typefaces, making both a visually compelling as well as critically poignant collage. In this piece, single images and collages, as well as the text that was painted directly on the back wall, all worked together and were equally important elements of the installation. When viewed from the front, the images appeared to be a solid wall or bank of pictures. Since they were hung on cables in descending order as they receded from the viewer, it was possible to walk beneath them, entering into the installation. The viewer could become part of the work and be surrounded by images. From the center of the installation, viewers were bombarded with information as both image and text. The text painted on the back wall included the title of the show, Metropolis Captured. It was the last thing discovered in the installation. The text functioned as another visual element. It did not caption or clarify. The text was even more fragmented than the images and was read as bits and pieces, as keys to understanding, but not in any way the final answer. The picture was about how one experiences the city. The viewer saw fragments of text and buildings simultaneously, as one does when one is in the urban environment. I have constantly been interested in the relationship between the actual city and the experience of its representation. In 1990, I created an installation at the Los Angeles Center for Photographic Studies at its old location just west of downtown LA. For this installation, I used building as a metaphor and composed a quasi-brick facade on the gallery wall. I mounted black and white photographs of images of both construction and destruction, of rebuilding a city, gentrification, as well as demolition. On top of these photographs, I adhered bricks and then attached them to the wall, giving the illusion of building blocks. In addition to the brick wall, I also suspended a work in the window. A number of homeless people lived nearby and often slept in the door jamb. I used a window blind and the idea of shutting the city out, literally, by making a large photo collage and adhering it to an 80 by 80 inch vertical blind. When the blinds were drawn, the image of the city, the horror to be shut out, still confronted the viewer. The blinds could be seen from both the inside and outside. Taking this idea one step further, I then juxtaposed the image of the homeless with the image of the cityscape in this installation of blinds. And this is the front side, and this is what's on the back side. Three blinds were suspended from the ceiling in an exhibition entitled Image Object Place. Viewers could view the work from both the inside and the outside and can change the images at will. The blinds were used as both a visual and architectural device. And this exhibit was at the California College of Arts and Crafts in 1991. I created another installation at the Dorothy Goldine Gallery in January of 1993. In this installation, I hung 4 of the vertical blind works in the center of the gallery, making a room within a room. Along the gallery walls, in a line, forming a quasi-narrative, I hung 20 by 20 inch color images, one after another, to completely encircle the space. I was interested in the idea of containment and claustrophobia, as well as the notion of alienation within a city. Shown here are the images on each side of the blinds. So this is a front, and this is the back side of that one. That's the back side of that one. Front side. backside. The images could only be seen right reading inside the structure. On the outside, the slats were flipped on their axes, adding another layer to the reading of the piece. To quote from a review by Tyler Stallings in the magazine Art Papers, quote, "The blinds form a room within a room, and since the blinds can be operated from either side, they become a metaphor for trust. Do you become a victim voluntarily by placing yourself in a situation in which blinds could be opened? Do you become a voyeur by deciding to open the blinds? Which space is the inner or the outer?" Unquote. The images on the blind reinforce these issues, creating a before-after or inside-outside dichotomy. The images on the blinds were also contained within a narrative of smaller images that encircled the gallery. Fragments of phrases appear and disappear among these images. The recurring phrase, "metropolis captured," suggests a city captured by mass media. The media never gives us the whole story. The narrative I construct from these fragments is a mediated representation, one based on the accumulation of disparate facts. Although the blinds were black and white photographs, the frieze of smaller images that encircled the space were color prints made from black and white negatives. A specific color was selected for each image, usually a somber tone that represented the color of the city: dark greens, grays, sepias, and deep blues. I'm interested in both the city as a site and the site of the city. The installation of vertical blinds in the window of the Jan Kestner Gallery in 1994 represents a site-specific project. The blinds and the imagery on them were designed to both complement the theme of the exhibition inside the gallery and to reflect urban life outside. The images on the blinds were in large color photographs made from collages that used the fiery imagery of the LA riots called from the newspaper. These individual collages use images from newspaper and magazines combined with fragments of text. The small collages are rephotographed and then reprinted, making the final image a seamless photograph. Initially, these images are employed by the news media under specific conditions and with a specific purpose in mind. They are usually documenting a tragic event. In my work, I am recontextualizing these catastrophes in order to question the limited nature of what the media delivers. In some of my later work, there even exists a confusion between what is terrible and what is joyful. These photos become caught between beauty and horror, oscillating back and forth. In my work, I am offering an alternative image of the city as a violent and destructive place. Although these photographs depicting fleeting fragments of faceless people, towering buildings, and war images could point to the city as a place to avoid, I do not have a negative view of the city. Because we are bombarded by violent images through the media, we become numbed. They are no longer shocking. In my work, I distort, skew, and recontextualize these images, asking viewers to reconsider how the media affects them. And these collages they're small. They're about 11 by 14 inches. For the collaborative installation at Rio Honda College in Whittier, California in 1994, entitled Building, I created a 40-inch high by 12-foot long by 20-foot long photograph that was attached to a wooden support suspended as a large rectangle in the center of the space. The photograph was a long black and white mural made from compositing a number of images and textural fragments together. The image faced in, so viewers were required to duck under it and be inside in order to view the work. Once inside, the viewer saw not only my photo murals with images of the urban experience, but also Charles LaBelle's Tabletop City, a fantasy world much like a movie set, where toy monsters attack chroma key blue buildings. This is the view from the backside. And this is the inside with the sculptural piece hanging in the middle. I reinstalled these photo murals at the California Museum of Photography for an exhibition called Photography and the Photographic: Theories, Practices, and Histories. This show was a series of installations at the CMP that was organized in conjunction with a conference on the relationship of theory to practice in photography. My photographs for this work, as in the Rio Hondo installation, faced in. But rather than leaving the backsides blank, I used the backs as a screen onto which I projected various colored images that connected both metaphorically and formally to the black and white images facing in. The use of projections creates an ephemeral image, one that can be interrupted by people moving through the space. The projections heighten the viewer's awareness of the space. This has been a consistent thread throughout my installations. I use two-dimensional photographs as architectural elements with a physical and spatial presence, sometimes even constructing actual spaces similar to those represented in the images themselves. In this way, there is a continual collapsing and re-expanding of the space within the installations. Because this installation was at the California Museum of Photography, I wanted to incorporate an aspect of the museum's collection within my work. I created the animated photographs inside their zoetrope, replacing the Muybridge image with my own. That's a close-up of the zoetrope. The following slides are of an installation from May of 1995 at San Francisco Camera Work. I created a wall-sized collage on two of the walls of the gallery using materials I had exhibited before in different installations. I had no set layout for these pieces, but let them grow on the gallery wall. The piece evolved organically through the process of installation, moving, stapling, and cutting images as I applied them to the wall. The image of the shadowed or silhouetted figure was used as a visual device, repeated through the piece, guiding the viewer's eye across the wall. These are details. In addition to these large collages, this exhibition also contains smaller photographic pieces, as well as two 80-inch square grids consisting of 16 20 by 20 color photographs that were Velcroed to the wall. One of these works, entitled The Agony and the Ecstasy, is a collage of appropriated images from Time and Life magazines, as well as images from the Los Angeles Times. The images document both pleasure and horror, but when seen together, out of their original context, their meanings become more ambiguous. I moved in this direction because I wanted to make pieces without text. The text anchors the work in a certain way and directs its interpretation. The use of the grid also serves to democratize the images, giving them all equal weight while pitting one against the other. In the summer of 1995, I was invited to do an installation at the Center for Contemporary Photography in Melbourne, Australia. Because I had to carry the work with me, and because I had did not see the space ahead of time, I decided to roll up all the existing images I had in my studio, both black and white and color, and carry them with me in 3 large photo boxes. When I arrived at the gallery, I laid out all the images on the floor and began to compose 2 large collages, as I had in San Francisco. I had enough work to fill 2 opposing walls. Within this wall of collages, images repeated at varying scales, creating momentary spatial shifts and imparting a sense of movement. So this was the one side of the wall, and it had mostly color images. And this is a picture of what was on the opposite side of the wall, and it contained just black and white images. Many of the images in the previous installation were small test prints for this next project. The City Never Sleeps is the name of my public art project that is currently on view in Hollywood. It was commissioned by the Los Angeles MTA as part of the Hollywood Fence project. I was selected to decorate the plywood fence the MTA erected at Hollywood Boulevard and El Centro Avenue to enclose the subway construction site. I wanted to place these heavily mediated images of the city back into the environment from which they came. The completed work has 22 8-foot square black and white photographs that occupy 3 sides of the city block. The images are separated by black panels, the equivalent of filmic stops. The images blend in with yet stand out from the urban environment and are big and bold enough to be seen by passing cars and buses. In continuing my desire to create environments with my work, I made an installation in 1996 at Amanda Obring Fine Art, a small gallery in LA Silver Lake neighborhood. I was given a room that was only about 100 square feet with a ceiling less than 8 feet high. For this installation, I tiled the entire space, all 4 walls and the floor, with 20 by 20 inch photographs. The work surrounded the viewer's field of vision in a very claustrophobic space. These images, in black and white as well as in color, are part of a growing archive of image fragments I have been collecting. Included are images of both pleasure and pain, violence and serenity, architecture and nature. Many come from photos of crowds, bombed-out buildings, and even historical images. Some are in focus, some are blurred. When seen together, they become a new work. The viewer is bombarded with a variety of images to sort through and ponder. They were able to create their own narrative by reading across the many images. And viewers could come into the gallery, and there was plexiglass over the images on the floor, so they could step right on them and sort of be inside the installation. By maintaining a system of components, in this case 20-inch and 8-inch square photographic panels, I can continuously reconfigure my work to fit within a given space. In this particular configuration, I was interested in combining different sizes of images, allowing the rigid structure of the grid to dissolve in order to explore the negative space, as well as working more obviously with repeated elements. The work evolved organically on the wall. I used the silhouetted figure, again, as a device that moved the viewer through the piece. This figure moved from image to image and from scenario to scenario as an anonymous observer, a voyeur but not a participant in the action. People have remarked that looking at so many images reminds them of channel surfing. I am not opposed to this reference, as my work is about choosing what you see and understanding what it means. It is like deciphering a code where you are given too much information. I will now move to some individual images that are less specifically about the city. These images were exhibited in 1996 at the Richard Heller Gallery in Bergamot Station in Santa Monica. This series began with this salon image. The source is an image of a Dutch salon painting by Willem van Hecht. To make this image, I removed all of the small paintings from a photograph of the painting, replacing the receding background space with a collage of words. As the collage words were on a flat plane, the receding space suddenly became confused. I was interested in creating ambiguous spatial relationships within a given setting. This piece also commented on the language used to talk about art and architecture, offering the notion that pictures cannot always be explained by words. Other photographs in this series include images from a British photo salon from the 19th century, an opera house, Chartres Cathedral, a Byzantine cathedral, as well as the Hermitage Museum. Last fall, when I was an artist in resident at the Banff Center for the Arts, I continued to work on this series. This is an installation of a small show at the end of the residency. This slide is another grid configuration consisting of 16 8-inch squares that were later recombined with the 20-inch squares to make the exploding grid piece I already showed you. And again, some of these images also appear in the gallery here. The individual images continue my investigation with images from art and architectural history. These are about 11 by 14 inches or smaller, just individual collages. This slide and the next slide are an installation I did last year at a company called North Communications, and it's the final configuration of these image fragments that I'd shown a couple other times since a permanent installation. My most recent works include an installation at the old LA Zoo for the 1997 Far Bazaar. Using the deserted animal cage as the setting of this piece, I hung images of aspects of city life, people, violence, buildings inside the cage. This piece made reference to the idea that we live in a cage, that we see the world from behind bars, and asked viewers to consider what the difference was between the current urban condition and the life of a caged animal. I've also been experimenting with making images on the computer. Rather than cut and paste, I've been making montages directly on the screen, making computer-generated negatives, and then printing the actual photographs. These are a few examples of these pieces. In addition to making individual photographic works and installations, I've also begun to create projects for the web. I see the web as a place to animate my images and to combine them in new ways. The installation in the gallery is my first attempt to project a computer-generated work. I'm going to just say a little bit about the installation that's here. This work is entitled Blur. It consists of an artist book, a photographic installation, and a website. For this installation, I wanted to create a dialogue between the animated and the static. I wanted the viewer to interact with the installation and participate in it. I wanted them to be able to move through the website in a public space rather than at home on the individual computer screen. The website is projected as an 8-foot wide image. It is surrounded by 2 inkjet paintings that are 8-foot squares. On the opposite wall is a collage of individual image fragments, most of which also appear in the website. There it is. The images are all appropriated fragments from newspapers, books, and magazines. They contain pieces of architecture, parts of people, and out-of-focus blurs. It is not necessary to contemplate each individual image, but to look at them together and construct a narrative as your eye moves from one to the next. The website is a large piece with numerous links. It is my hope that the viewer will spend some time moving through the various animations. I also made an artist book to accompany the exhibition. I often make books that not only function as companion pieces to the installation, but are something that people can take home with them for a modest fee. I like the idea that people can have access to the work outside of the gallery space. Making books and now making websites give people this unlimited access. My primary concern when making images, artist books, websites, and installations is how viewers navigate through space, be it cyberspace, the space of the gallery, the space of the printed page, or the space of an image, and how that experience can simulate the experience of the city. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Jody. If you have questions, please, you have your opportunity. I'm sure Jody will answer anything.
Any questions? What's in the gallery? That's like an inkjet process. A company called Metro Media that does a lot of the billboards in LA, and I think here too, made that. And they have these huge rollers, these big drums, and it's a piece of vinyl, and there's 4 different inkjets, the 4 colors. It goes around the big drum, and and it's a 4-color process. Thank you. Yeah. The blinds are just large photographs. The blinds are just real large photographs that are then mounted onto, store-bought blinds. When I was looking at more photography work, I definitely looked at Robert Frank. I can't really say, off the top of my head who my influences are. I look at a lot of photo work, a lot of conceptual artwork, a lot of work that uses text. But I off the top of my head, I don't really know. Anybody else? Yeah. I'm just beginning to use it in my work. It was something that I avoided for a long time. In order to make the photos, I've sort of wanted to continue to make a photographic print, cut it with a matte knife, make a collage, re-photograph it, and I've only recently decided to scan images in and try to do that kind of compositing on the computer. But for me anyway, working on the computer presents other problems in terms of how you output it. And I haven't really resolved that for myself yet. I am very interested in the work that you can do with animation and webworks, and I'm trying to learn how to do CD-ROMs too as another way of getting work out there. Yeah. Yeah, usually what I do is I take notes on what I read and write down fragments of other people's thoughts that I find interesting. And then when I'm going to kind of compose the text, I go back to those notebooks and start typing them into the computer. And then sometimes I just make them up in my head, whatever I think of or whatever I find that relates to the images. Yeah, for the most part, all of the images that I use are appropriated. I don't think there's a single piece in any of the work in the gallery that is mine. Usually what I do is I go through the magazines and newspapers and just rip out pictures that I like and throw them into a drawer. And then when I'm ready to make work, I go through them. And I have a sort of standard size cropping tool that it's like a little window that I look through and select that part of the image and make a negative of that. And then when I've got all the negatives together, I make some prints. And then the prints that I feel are successful, I'll mount and start, using for the installations. And with the text, it's sort of a similar kind of thing. The images that I choose are pretty specific. I can't really tell you what it is that I like. It's parts of architecture, it's anonymous people, it's parts of either construction or destruction. Usually it's never a whole image, but a part of something that I'm attracted to. And I take now both black and white and color images. I take images that are sort of the background of advertisements and things like that are sort of more blurred, and I see those within the installation as these sort of spaces in between, or these motions between the different action within the images. Does that answer your question? It's architectural criticism, books about urban theory, some art history, whatever. Sometimes it's articles from the newspaper, whatever I happen to be reading at the time. But mostly it's theoretical text. Is that it? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming.